Pencil Kings, 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 Pencil Kings.
All right, we're back once again. This is the Pencil Kings podcast. Today we're talking to Cale Atkinson. And before we get into this, I do such a horrible job at this, but I got to talk about some of the things that we have at Pencil Kings that I think are awesome. So we've got these different drawing challenges. We've got the figure drawing challenge, the shading drawing challenge, and the perspective drawing challenge. Now, these are three awesome skills, essential skills that everybody needs. And so what we did was these are not part of the Pencil Kings regular membership. They're our premium courses, so you don't have to become a member. You can just get them as a one-off. Members do get a discount, but it's amazing value. And what it is it's 30 days focusing on these specific skills. And the goal of these courses is that in these 30 days, we take all the knowledge that you can learn about it, and we distill it down to like the 20% essential skills that you need to master the skill. So instead of having to study like tons of different books and tons of different videos, it gives you a very clear step-by-step progression for 30 days. There's recorded coaching calls that come with it. There's a Facebook group where you can post your work and see the work that other people are doing. And there's homework exercises. So it's not just like you're in this endless learning mode. You actually sit and do the stuff, which is so important to actually learning it. So yeah, that's my spiel. Welcome, Cale. I'm excited to talk to you, a fellow Canadian. To start off, why don't you give people like a 1-minute overview of what you do, and then we'll get into your story and how it all came to be.
Sure, sounds good. First off, thanks for having me on the podcast. Excited to be here. I'll try to explain kind of what I do and not ramble too much. I'm an illustrator and author, and I also worked as an animator. So I've done a little bit of everything in my kind of artistic career, doing work with video games and yeah, working as an animator for different games and some cartoon work. And then now I work full-time freelance, mostly working in children's illustration and children's books, where I have 2 books that I've written and illustrated with Disney Hyperion. The second one just came out actually this week, which is pretty awesome and exciting, called Explorers of the Wild.
Nice.
And then, yeah, otherwise I do a lot of just still other work here and there, and lots of my own personal work where I still love doing animation and any other stuff that just kind of excites me in art.
Perfect. So how do you go from whatever you're doing to full-time freelance? Because I feel like it's not just skills and it's not just networking. It's like courage and taking a risk, or maybe it's not a risk. I don't know. But I'm really curious because I've talked to a lot of the members one-on-one, and that's their thing. That's their big dream, is that they want to turn freelance. And it's a ginormous conversation. We could probably spend 10 hours, and every artist would have a different path that they took. But for you specifically, how did you make the jump, I feel like it comes down really to a decision. And once you're like, okay, there's no going back, like I'm going freelance, then everything starts to happen. But could you break it down a little bit for us and for the people who are listening? Because I know that it's a topic that's really on a lot of people's minds.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I've definitely talked to a number of people about like going freelance and whether or not they should go freelance. And I mean, I think like the biggest thing with that question or that decision is it's such a personal choice. Like it's such a person-to-person thing. And like if it's right for that person at that time, because it is so much built on whether you think you're ready for it, where you feel like you're confident enough to do it, or if you have enough things built up where you know you're going to be okay with projects or a safety net of savings to go after it. It's an interesting thing. Like for myself, I worked freelance once before when I left one job at a game studio, and then worked freelance for about a year. And that was kind of half and half. Like one half of the reasoning was the studio wasn't the best place, and so left it on kind of the hopes of finding other stuff. And where I was living, there wasn't a lot of other studios or anything around, so it was kind of the option at that time. And then I got another job at a studio and moved for that, and it was all good. And so now when I went freelance, it was more the choice to do it. And for myself, that it just made sense. Where I had a lot of contract work, like every job that I've ever done at a studio or full time or whatever, or even part time, I've always been doing contract work as well, or I've always been doing freelance work as well. I've always been trying to get connections. I've always been doing it regardless. And for a lot of people, I think the hard thing is they want to just go freelance, like they want to quit tomorrow and start.
Right.
And I'll talk to them and be like, oh, it's, super cool. It's awesome. Do you have like some stuff lined up? Do you have some, clients you've been talking to, some cool connections? And they're like, no, I want to quit. And then I'll start doing that. And it's like, that's not really going to happen. Like for me, like it took like at least, a year to years to building up connections to get these contracts, to get these clients that now are coming back to me. And so it's that time of building it up or putting different irons in the fire and just hoping they'll come back. Like when I was doing freelance that first year, every morning I would go on like every like forum, every site I could look up that had like job postings, like even Craigslist. I would go on Craigslist and I would go to every city, like every major city, and go to their art job section and have my like my blanket email where you change a name, change a sentence, and whatever. And I'd reply to anyone that sounded like maybe it could be like a contract job or I could do it remotely. And funny enough, one of those turned out to be a headhunter for a Disney studio that then I went and worked full-time for later.
From Craigslist?
Yeah, and it didn't say anything in the ad. Like it didn't say Disney studio.
Crazy.
It was like, hey, assets needed for blah, 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 online game. And then that turned out to be this headhunter and stuff. And it was pretty funny. But like, it's kind of like that work that it takes. Like you said, it's not just about, I don't know, like it's not just about skill or how good you are and stuff. It's so much about it is the like you getting yourself out there because it's all on you at this point, like there's no, unless you have like the other things are getting an agent and stuff like that where it can help just, again, more irons in the fire. Now you have somebody else out there also trying to get you work or getting your stuff out there. But it takes having all those things out there and then coming back and kind of feeling it out yourself, right? Like for me, this time it just felt totally right. Like I was having more freelance and contract work and my book work coming in than my full-time work. And so one was almost pushing out the other. And so I wanted to do the freelance work. It was the work that I was most excited about. And so it was not the hardest decision for me I think I'll push that one out. And it wasn't a giant risk at this point for myself. But there's no right or wrong. Like some people can totally do that dive, just go for it. And they have the, I don't know, tenacity to work it and make it work for them. It's kind of whatever someone really feels comfortable with. And it's always going to be a little bit of a leap because you don't know. And it's that kind of, it's all on you, but yeah, there's definitely different levels to it.
Oh, I think I really like that response. And the one follow-up question that I have is, if you can remember back, like how much time do you think you were spending on it sounds like it was a daily basis. It might have been weekly, I'm not sure. But how much time were you spending specifically just on that outreach in the beginning? Because I feel like a lot of people are in that beginning stage and they need to start building some momentum. And it's like you said, it's not just like this switch that you flip.
Yeah.
It's just like this snowball that's just so minuscule, but it slowly builds over time, and all this adds up to like this giant snow. Well, I don't know how big it is, but it adds up into more opportunities coming into you more consistently.
Yeah, I think it's pretty much just like you described it. Like you have to put in that time, and it's not even to say necessarily that suddenly, if you put in, I don't know, like half a year of pushing your stuff out there, suddenly you're just always going to have work. Like it's such the whole like when it rains it pours, when it's dry kind of deal is really the thing with freelance. Like you'll have those times no matter what where it is just patches of nothing and you're getting worried or whatever, and then it'll just snowball and you're just like, oh my god, I don't want to say no to any of this, but it's so much that I have to. But yeah, at the beginning, I mean, I don't know, at least every day when I was doing freelance, I would try to again look up anything I could and trying to figure out like the different angles, and depending what you want to do, right? Like depending if you're, I don't know, like an animator or a children's illustrator or graphic designer or whatever, like it's going to change what you're looking for and who you're approaching. For myself, it was also wanting to get into children's illustration. So I was also looking up and researching agencies to send to. And so again, it's like, okay, well, spending, however much time it is to look up as many as I can, research them, and then, again, blanket email and send out as much as I can. And it's that like, I think it's that constant kind of like attack thing that some people find hard to do, where you almost have to be okay with pestering people. Like if you don't get a reply, nobody said no to you. They might not have even seen it. Maybe they just deleted it. Maybe they didn't have time. Maybe they got 50 emails that day. So send it again, right? Do another piece. Do a couple other pieces. Send it again. And until someone says no or says like, please stop emailing you or me, then like keep doing it. And same thing with like postcard send outs, or even sending your stuff to a studio, like where lots of studios I find won't necessarily always put up like that they have art job openings, but if you do send their stuff, like they're always kind of looking, and if you fit the right bill and if anything comes up, then you'll kind of be in their eyes or in their focus. But just send stuff out, and if you don't hear anything back, again, send more stuff to them. Or it's kind of like that, not being afraid just to really like spam yourself out to the world, and because you have to get in front of people, right? Like you could be the best artist in the world, but if nobody knows you're out there, you're not going to get any work.
Yeah. So I guess then if you had to break it down as a percentage wise, would you say that 80% of your time is roughly working on, especially at the beginning too, because I feel like this is where people need the most help in the beginning. So is it like 80% of the time working on your portfolio and posting maybe to your blog, but then 20% of the time is the promotion, where I don't count posting to your blog, even though that's promotion, but it's like if you post on forums, then I would count that. Or if you're on Craigslist, I would count that. Is it an 80-20, or how would you break it down?
I would say, I mean, let's say like, it's really hard to say. I mean, I'd say like maybe like 70-30, or it's one of those things where obviously you don't want to just be putting like 90% of your time into pushing yourself out there. But if you have like a really solid portfolio and solid work where you feel really good about it, I mean, I would then start I would like change it up depending what I have ready to show, I guess. Like if I'm really working on my portfolio, and you should always be working on it, you shouldn't just stop at some point, because you're always going to progress and get better, and then your portfolio will get better. But when you get to a good enough point where you feel confident in sending it out, then my percent would change. And instead of it being like 80-20, 90-10 for working just on your portfolio and starting to try to get stuff out, I would switch it. And now it would be like 90% of me just looking up everything and just trying to get my stuff out there and taking that time almost to do it, and then switching back. And now, okay, I'm going to work back on my portfolio. I sent everything out, like I did a huge send out, and now try to wait, see if anything comes back, work on new pieces. Okay, got some new stuff, do it again, switch it. And I think I would do that mostly, aside from maybe like I said, every morning or whatever, spending like some time trying to see if there's anything new that's been posted, anything new that's come up I can send to. But I was more doing it, I think, in kind of chunks like that.
I really like that you said that, because I feel like when you're in that mode where you decide to go freelance, it's just to understand that, okay, so you need to get your portfolio to a certain point, but then it's like you go through periods where it's 90% of time doing the outreach.
Mm-hmm.
Because I feel like a lot of people don't realize how much effort it takes to kind of cut through the noise, and to hit or to be in that right person's inbox or voicemail or postcard or whatever it is at the right time, because they could totally be looking for you, but they could be looking for you in 3 months from now or a year from now even, that when you send it out today, it might just not be the right time for it.
Totally. Like it's a huge thing. Like I think the hard thing is lots of people maybe send their stuff, and like with postcards, like and I know they're big with like kidlit stuff. I don't know, and probably with other like illustration jobs and stuff. But you can send out whatever 300 and hear back from maybe one or maybe two, and that's kind of a success. Like you're not going to hear back from probably all of them, but that one or two might be a job. Like my wife did a postcard send out a little while ago, and she got a good job out of it, and didn't hear from most of the others, but still made it all completely worthwhile. And it's like you said, it's all depending on that time, and it's nothing really like it's a bit to do with your skill, but so much is really just about what are they looking for at that time. Like if the art director's looking at postcards and he's like, oh, we got a series coming out, about whatever, puppies, and then your postcard is this, dog print that you did, and somehow it fit at that right time, then it's great. But it kind of so much it's built around that. So you don't want to get all all worried or overbuild it up if you don't hear anything back. Like, oh, nobody likes my work, or oh my God, I must really suck, or they just don't like me. So much is just, well, they're looking for this. And so your stuff could be awesome, but it's just not fitting what they want at that moment. And if you do another send out, in another couple months or whatever, it could totally hit at that time.
All right, I want to change gears a little bit here and talk about how you got started. Because before we started recording here, you were saying how you were kind of a cocky art kid, and I could really relate to that. I was a cocky art kid. I thought I was really awesome, and I took my lumps here and there. But you had a period where you were sending out tons of your comic strips to different publications. And can you tell us a little bit about that? Because I feel like from a lot of the people that I've talked to, artists generally tend to be fairly reserved, but that's not how you were, and that's not how you are. You're getting word out right from the beginning, or from very early on.
Yeah, and again, I don't know where it came from, and I'm not some guy with like a big ego, or at least now I'm not. I don't know if as a kid maybe I was and it faded away. Maybe once I realized I wasn't like really that great of an artist, it all went away. But yeah, when I was like a kid and I loved drawing, loved telling stories, and always kind of did. I never had like an aha moment like some artists talk about when they first saw the Jungle Book or when they first saw something or whatever. I don't really know what that was for me, but I just always loved telling stories, always loved drawing. I mean, when I was in elementary school, I was selling comics that I photocopied to classmates. And then I got really into doing comic strips, and I really wanted to be in newspapers and magazines and stuff. And it was around the time that the internet was like kind of in households everywhere, and you could start to look up all these places. So when I started doing my comic strips, I again thought like, yeah, these are great. These should be in like magazines. What newspaper wouldn't want these? And so I would look up like every big magazine or newspaper I could, and I would mail them to them. And so I mailed my comic strips to the New Yorker and to New York Times and the biggest newspapers in Chicago or San Francisco, and even like magazines. I have rejection letters from like the National Enquirer and like Better Homes and Garden. And like they aren't good comic strips. Like when I look at them now, like they're really like I can see why they're rejected. But like as a kid, it was just like I was so excited just to get them out there and get like a rejection letter. I was super stoked on because it meant they actually saw it. Like I never got a rejection letter from like the New York Times or any actual like big newspaper. But it was I was just super big on sharing my stuff, and part of me just thought that like they were great and they should be in the newspapers.
And how old were you when you started sending these out?
Probably started when I was maybe 10 to 11.
Really? Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. It was I mean, I really have to like thank my parents for like supporting me and just being like, yeah, go for it. Like they were never like, yeah, sure, why are you even doing that? Like they would totally help me do it all. And my dad would take, all my big envelopes I'm sending out to all these places and mail them. So but it was great. Like I remember even in British Columbia, there's the Province newspaper, and which is like the biggest newspaper out here. And the guy actually replied to me in like my email. And it was like and I'm sure he was just humoring me because like they aren't great. And it's not like he was actually like, ooh, these are pretty close. You're almost there. But it was like, it still meant the world. Like you got a response. And it was actually a really nice, positive response. And so it's just like fuel to the fire where you're like, oh my God, okay, well, I'm going to work twice as hard now. And I had like a giant goal at that time of doing like a year's worth of comic strips, like doing 365 comic strips. So if I did get like in a newspaper or syndicated or whatever, I'd like have enough work for a full year. I think I got like 100 and can't remember what, like 160 or 70 done.
And so where do you think like I said, cocky before, but I feel like it's sort of this like naive cocky because you don't know what you don't know and you're a kid, but you just know that you love being creative and you love telling stories in this. Where do you think the change happened where you started to get traction with what you were doing? Was it going to school, or was it, you did get something placed in a magazine or a newspaper or something?
Okay. Well, yeah, I don't know, like I went on like a bunch of weird roads, and so much of it was like you said, like that naiveness, like blind, like I don't know, blind excitement, determination, and like just being super naive. Like I never went to any kind of a school. I was going to go to film school because like I had to switch up later in high school where I got super into like film instead of art. Like I was slowing down my comic strips. They weren't the huge syndicated success that I was hoping yet. So then I got super into film in school, and I wanted to like, okay, I want to actually be a filmmaker and a director. And again, so I put my whole overly intense, naive determination into that. I made a short film that played at a couple festivals, which is cool, and I worked on doing editing and was actually having like success in it. And then that's when I was going to go to school because I graduated around that time. So I was like, oh, I should either go to like a 3D animation school, which was kind of my original plan, because at that time like 3D animation was becoming bigger and bigger, and it was kind of the thing to do, I guess it seemed like for like art and animation. But at that time then with film, I was like, well, I should probably I should go to film school. And I was going to do that, and I applied to a couple and had interviews and got accepted. And then something kind of clicked in my head. And I don't want to like talk down to schools because it's such, again, like a personal choice and what's right for you and what fits for you and everything else like that. But for me, it just didn't click. And I had the interview, and I remember like the professors who were interviewing me, they just seemed kind of cynical, and I don't know, it just bummed me out. And I was like, I don't think I need this. And so then I decided not to do that and work more in film, and to like not just yammer on about all the other like random things I was doing. I started getting back into wanting to get into animation through some stuff around that time again, where something hit me where I realized I couldn't like for a career, I couldn't just suddenly become a film director. Like I wasn't going to start suddenly making my own movies and being, successful and whatever, famous and just being able to do that. Like that doesn't happen. You gotta, put in your dues. You gotta just get a job in that field. And I was working as a videographer doing like high-end weddings and stuff in Vancouver, and like corporate shootings and stuff. And it wasn't super fun. Like it's not making movies. It's not what I really wanted to do. And so I kind of had a fork in the road where I was like, if I have to do a job, and like a job for someone, doing someone else's thing, do I want that to be in like film, like live stuff, corporate, whatever, or do I want it to be in art? And, maybe working in an animation studio or whatever else that could be. And for me, the latter felt like that could be more fun, or that could be more rewarding than just filming like for a corporation or something. And so when I decided to do that, it's kind of around the time I realized I wasn't a good artist either. Because like I never really looked up other artists that much. I just drew because I loved it, and I was kind of like, yeah, I think I'm pretty good. This is great. And around that time, art blogs were just starting to come around, and then there was always some forums, and I remember going on I think it was the AWN's forum at the time, and seeing some artists on there, and totally suddenly realizing like I'm not a good artist at all, and I have like no idea what I'm doing. Like I was the kind of kid who, or not even kid, like teenage, whatever, like just, yeah, like teenager, where like people would do the foundation lines, like, draw your circle and the crosshairs for your eyes and nose. And I was like, why would anyone do that? That's stupid. I know what I'm doing. And meanwhile, all my drawings are like garbled looking things, but I thought they were great. And so at that point, I was like, oh, I really actually have to practice and get good if I want to do this. Because like I don't have a clue what I'm doing, and looking at these artists that were just like blowing my mind, because there were different like threads on the forum, like the daily sketch thread. So you could see these people were doing these things like now. It wasn't like looking at some finished painting that could have taken however long, and you're kind of detached from it. This is like just a sketch that just happened, so I can see like kind of how far removed I am from that, and that kind of really put like fire under me that like I needed to actually learn, and I needed to get better as an artist and not just draw whatever I wanted to as much. And so that would have been the turning point. To like make a long story short, it was kind of a little bit of that blind like naiveness kind of drained away a bit, and reality kind of set in a bit about like, okay, what you have to do to actually to get in there, to make it. Just another funny thing before that all happened, another completely like out of our out of our grasp thing that me and one of my brothers tried to do in the whole blind naiveness again is we came up with some cartoon pitches, and we actually tried to pitch them to all the big agencies in the States and networks in the States. So I have rejection letters from like Cartoon Network, and we sent our cartoon pitch to like Conan O'Brien and Jay Leno and all these celebrities to try to get them to look at it and like, you know, promote it. It's pretty great.
You are fearless. I feel like your name should be Fearless Cale Atkinson.
Or it's just kind of like Foolish Cale.
I'm gonna go with
I like
Fearless.
it. I like that one.
Because I feel like it's really inspiring to hear that, you know, like the barrier between you and this sort of like this giant thing that you want to do is literally just telling somebody or asking somebody like, hey, we've got this thing. Are you interested? Or starting that conversation.
Mm-hmm.
When usually we create these like giant things in our head of all these different steps that we have to do. Like, okay, so my goal is to have a cartoon on this show. So I got to go to art school first, and then I got to learn this, and then I got to learn the ropes here, and then I got to start going to these conferences, and then I got to speak at this thing, and then I got to write my book, and then then I can do the thing that I really want. I was like, nope. You can just go for it right now. Like whether or not you're ready for it is a completely different conversation, but it can be as simple as that.
Yeah, I think so. And it's just kind of like, why not? I don't know. Like, for me, it was always like hearing no wasn't really like a bad thing. Like, obviously, you wanted to hear like a glowing yes, or like, oh my God, you're amazing, you're so talented, let's get you to make all the cartoons you could ever dream. I didn't really get that ever, but the no's, I don't know. It was still exciting because you were still getting your stuff. Like, it was still getting out there, and it was that thrill of having something out there that could possibly be like a yes, or could be something, versus nothing. Like for me, even now, I'll go through times, like good periods of time where I have projects, and so I don't really have anything like out there, like out floating in the ether of the world, waiting to hear back on, like a pitch or whatever. And that still drives me crazy because I feed so much off of just that kind of waiting and anticipation and throwing something out there. It was pretty funny when we were doing our cartoons. We went to an animation festival in Vancouver that came down to Vancouver, and it was the animation show, which was Don Hertzfeldt and Mike Judge's animation festival, and they were both at the festival. And so me and my brother actually like tracked down Mike Judge and handed him our like DVD of the pitch, and like nervously, like excitedly, we're like berating him, and he's just kind of like, yeah, don't worry, it's going in my backpack, don't worry, yep, okay, thank you. And then like months later we're like emailing him, did you get the pitch, so what's happening? And we never heard back, unfortunately, but you know, I'm sure he loved it.
Do you still do this stuff now? Like, are you still pitching people? Like Mike Judge is a big deal. For those of you listening who aren't familiar, like he did Beavis and Butthead and
King of the Hill.
King of the Hill.
Office Space. And, like super, amazing. Like one of my heroes for animation and storytelling and stuff like that. So it was, it was a big deal of going up to him, and I'm sure it was like the most awkward encounter in the world. Like if you look back on some weird camera footage or something, it probably would have been like the worst looking thing of him just like, oh my God, how do I get these like two kids away from me?
But do you still do it now? Do you still pitch, or have you sort of reined things back a little bit and like you have an agent, so maybe your agent is doing this kind of stuff?
Yeah, it's kind of, I think, like, I mean, it's reeled back a little bit just because of me trying to figure out and having a little bit more realistic idea of what I want to do. And so I'm not as blindly sending things out every which way with like this giant, like overly big picture in my head. Whereas like now I still pitch, like lately it's been more pitching children's books and stuff that I'm writing. And so it's still kind of in the same vein, but it's a little bit more attainable because I do have a children's book agent, and I have done books now. And so it's kind of the same, but actually with the tact and maybe like the skill and experience to actually do those things, which is kind of nice, because otherwise before it's like the fun of sending it out, but the realism that any of that stuff was actually ever going to work out, like it wasn't the odds weren't really for me, even though I couldn't see it.
All right, well, we're almost at the end, but I do want to talk a little bit about your actual illustrations because I feel like they're beautiful. And one of the things that struck me was actually, and it's also really cool that you do a lot of animation as well that you can see on your blog. But one of the things that really struck me was the use of color and texture. So I was wondering, because we'll send people to your website at the end, but I'm wondering how you approach that or what your not necessarily philosophy, but I feel like it's definitely intentional because the drawings aren't like there's a deliberate simplicity. I want to say that might be the wrong word, but the color and the texture is the thing that really kind of blew me away. And so I was curious about your thoughts on your process there.
Yeah, I think I mean it's all kind of like that like evolved deal, like the style thing where it kind of is that evolved process where you don't really like I'm not one to deliberately like really like break things apart and think about what I like in them. Like I wish I could have friends who do that and they can just totally like analyze things and feel wise. I'm more of like the guy who just goes in and starts painting and tries to feel it out through like mistakes and through just like doing it and changing it and doing it and changing it and adjusting and changing. And then I guess slowly evolving to something that appeals to me, I guess, more. Like as far as like the texture and like color kind of stuff, I think a lot of that has been developed kind of through inspirations and then just through doing it and then it kind of growing out of what I just liked. Like a lot of my inspirations, I think illustration wise, especially like at this point, are a lot of those that kind of retro modern style of like the 50s and 60s of golden books and Disney and all that stuff, which I think is pretty evident in my work, like the Mary Blair and the Ivandale and the Martin Alice Provenson and a lot of these artists that did that really really cool like stylized like simple shape broken apart artwork that was really cool and different at that time, and I find it still so grabbing. Or like Charlie Harper is another one. And so I'm sure lots has been pulled from that and then hopefully kind of just developed over time. As far as like textures, I always have been like a fan of like the traditional look and the traditional paint look. I'm not like a super traditional painter. So I always have been trying to figure out the whole like, well, how do I kind of imitate that and pull away from the digital look? Like my kind of evolution of my like style and my art has kind of progressively gotten rougher and rougher as I go. Like initially, I was just using like a little tiny tablet or like a mouse before that. But when I was using a tablet and painting in Photoshop, it would all be in like paths where you kind of like path out and outline your artwork, and it's all super clean because that's kind of what I could do. I couldn't really do rough painting. And then as I've gotten, like I got a little bit better at the tablet, and then later on, and now I have like a Wacom Cintiq. For anyone who doesn't know what that is, it's the monitor that you draw directly on. And so it's allowed me to be rougher. And then I've also worked on developing my own Photoshop brushes and trying to get different textures and different like feels of paint and brush that help me with that. And for anybody like curious or wanting to try my brushes, I have them, like a big pack of them all on Gumroad. And it's free and pay what you want, so anybody can go grab those and play around with them. But it's been just a lot of playing and experimenting. I mean, my whole philosophy in art and painting is just to like just go for it and just try stuff, and like there's no right or wrong, so you can just paint it all and then change all the colors and try this and try that. And that's been like my entire career pretty much. So I don't really feel like I've found my full like quote unquote style. I think it's always kind of ever changing. But yeah, it's just been the playing with what kind of appeals.
I really like that, and I think it's something that a lot of us artists you get in your head a little bit too much, and for you, I feel like it's the opposite. It's almost like you have this superpower. You just go for it, and you sort of just you have an idea of where you want to get to. You might not know exactly how to get there, but you just start taking action immediately,
Like,
and you're like,
story
"Well,
of my life, I think. Go for it blindly and hope."
Yeah, no, I think it's great. Well, we should wrap up. Where can people find you online, Cale?
You can find me on most of the social medias. You can find me on Twitter at like the number 2, D Cale. And I'm on Instagram and Tumblr. And you can find me as well on my website, which is www.cale.ca. Yeah, I think that's mostly it. But I'm usually active, and if anybody ever has any questions or anything, I try to answer. Or you can email me always, and my email's on my website and stuff. I'm always happy to try to like help with anything I can or answer anything.
Awesome. And we'll also have show notes and links to all that stuff for you at pencilkings.com/podcast. So thank you so much, Cale, for sharing your story. Really inspiring. Before we go, if you go to Cale's site, cale.ca, and I'm not sure which page of the blog it is, but if you just scroll through, it'll only take you a minute or two to find. He's got an animated GIF or GIF, whatever you say, of the rejection letters. And when I saw that, it just made me chuckle. And I think it kind of like encapsulates this whole interview very nicely. Just this idea of like, just put it out there. It's okay if you get a no. And I would throw down the gauntlet a little bit for you, listener, to see if you can get rejected from somewhere. Now, it's not to feel bad or anything like that, but it's to get you outside of your comfort zone, to just send something out, do your best work, package it up, send it out with a nice letter, and see if you can get a rejection letter. It's probably not as easy as you think it is, as Cale will probably attest to.
Yeah, and I think like it really is that thing to not be afraid of that, like be excited about it almost. Like there was a really great quote, I think it was like Charlie Kaufman. He's the guy who wrote like Eternal Sunshine of a Spotless Mind, Being John Malkovich and stuff, really good screenwriter. And he had this talk, and he gave a quote that was something like failure, rejection should be worn like a badge of honor because it means you actually tried. And it always like really hit me because it's like, it's so true. Like every time you get rejected, that's you trying, whereas somebody who never got rejected possibly never actually put themselves out there. And it's that, just being excited about the fact that you are putting yourself out there. Like that's a really big accomplishment, and we should be kind of thought of more that way than the way of like, oh, I failed again, or oh my God, nobody likes me.
All right, well, we're gonna wrap there. So thank you so much, Cale. I really, really appreciated it, and I'm glad I hope that you, listener, got some great takeaways here. And we'll be back. We can't talk today. We'll be back next week with another episode of the Pencil Kings podcast.
Scope demands patience, skill, years of practice.
You talk like a fool. I would trade a century of practice for an ounce of inspiration.